Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Wilder Ride, where we are getting wilder by the minute, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And for season 2, we're looking at the film Blazing Saddles. And today, we are diving into the movie One Roll That Joint Yourself, Brother, minute at a time. I'm Alan Sanders, I'm your host.
I am Walt Murray, your co-host.
And it's just the two of us, you and I.
And it must be about 4:20.
Well, we had a down south southern attorney and a humorist all squared away, but apparently he could not find a babysitter.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a shout out, though, to Brad Stevens, attorney at law, who actually wrote a book, Reflections in Muddy Waters, a very funny look at growing up in a very, very small town of Cassville, Georgia.
That is a small
He's
town.
now an attorney. He went up to New York for 3 or 4 years and had a child and realized this is not the city I want to raise my child in, and came back here to good old Georgia, settled in Cartersville.
Well, what you could do is just do that voice throughout our show today as him.
I could actually be, he doesn't sound like that at all, but, but I could. We could create a character, Brad Stevens, who talks like this.
Now, that'd be more of a Kentucky accent,
Yeah,
though. So
yeah. It was. Is that Kentucky or is
mint
that's?
juleps
I thought that's Savannah style. That.
that could be Savannah.
That's sort of like the uppity down home sound. You know, like the the Savannah.
Yeah, you look
you're
down your
just
nose
not
at
from
everybody,
here.
and yeah.
But no, he's a very well respected attorney in this here part of the South. I could do that. I could have him to say things like, "I remember the time that I was talking about."
I don't think he'd appreciate that.
Oh my God, we're recording. I forgot. Okay. Yeah, that's gone.
And we've already done our introduction.
And we did our introduction. I didn't tell you what we're doing today, so let me go ahead and dive into this minute. We are by ourselves. Our attorney was not able to join us today. We thought it'd be funny to get an attorney's perspective, but he's also a humorist, a satirist. He does write for the paper and does a lot of commentary as well, and is very, very, very funny. He would have meshed perfect with us both in this room.
Yeah, I'm sorry he couldn't make it in.
Yeah. You know, having wee little ones, sometimes it's tough making time out of your schedule to be able to do stuff like this. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at these minutes ourselves. Hey, we had a couple of minutes during season 1 we took care of ourselves. We can do it here. We're going to look at this back to Rock Ridge. We're starting off with Jim shaving off his beard, getting himself all cleaned up. Looks like maybe even dried up a little bit, a little more sober. And we're going to end this minute with the line from Jim saying, quote, "I don't want you going out there this morning." No, we'll have to figure out why. So let's, before we even dive into this minute, well, I actually having the script, and I love doing this to you because you do a lot of the work on actors and their backgrounds and movies and things they've been in. That's been sort of like your bailiwick. I haven't jumped in there. That's your thing. It is yours to own and do with what you want. But I usually have the script, and I like to dive in and find places where there might be changes from the script, things that may have been done in a different order. I found, as I was going through today for working on this minute, a whole scene that was completely left out. Because remember, we had the scene not too many minutes ago about Harriet Van Johnson sending the letter calling the governor the biggest asshole in the state?
Yes.
So that letter actually gets delivered to the governor's office.
Oh, really?
And here's an entire scene. I'm going to go ahead and go through it. This is the scene as was written for a bridge before we got to today's episode. Interior, governor's office. The office is apparently empty. From behind the drapes, we hear the muffled voice of Governor William J. LePetomane singing a few bars of the immortal Avalon. Now the door opens, and one of the governor's flunkies enters holding a telegram. He looks around for the governor, doesn't see him, and is about to exit when he suddenly hears the singing. He attentively searches the room for the source of the sound. He finally moves in the right direction toward the drapes. He pulls the drape aside, revealing the governor and Miss Stein in an affectionate embrace on a small chase lounge. The governor is playing a little ukulele as he serenades Miss Stein. The flunky, Governor, what? Who are you? Your brother-in-law. I work for you. Urgent telegram, sir. Well, what's your name? Harry. Oh, yeah, that's right, Harry. You say one word about this to my beloved wife, your beloved sister, and I'll have you fired and burned. Give me that. So remember we talked about, was the governor married? That answers this question.
Answers that question.
He is definitely married. And apparently he doesn't recognize his brother-in-law. And he threatens him. Don't you dare tell you, my wife, your sister, what I'm doing, or I will have you fired and burned. Fired and burned.
Yes.
Then he says, give me that. Rips the telegram from the man's hands and begins to read. Mumble, 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 mumble. Asshole. Miss Stein, anything you say, Bill. She then turns over. Lepetame, no, not that, not now. This is outrageous. I must speak to Hetty. As he leaves, he starts saying to himself, serious business, serious business, serious business. Cut to the huge portrait on the wall over Lepetamane's desk depicting a bride and groom. The camera zooms into the painting. Groom's face moves from side to side. The groom's face is that of Lamar's. Lamar working himself into a euphoric frenzy. The black sheriff scheme is working to perfection. The citizens are enraged. They should be pulling up the stakes at any moment. The time is right to move into Rock Ridge and snap up the land. Ha 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 ha. Today, Rock Ridge. Tomorrow, Laredo. I didn't know they were in Texas.
I didn't either.
There you go. So apparently which we never see this device used in, remember we had the bridal picture in Hedley Lamar's office, but we didn't see a painting in the governor's office. But apparently there was supposed to be a shtick of a painting where the face could be like pulled away and you could like look through and spy on the governor.
So I'm glad the scene got cut. Did they even film the scene? Do you know?
I don't think they.
I haven't
you
seen
know,
it
no,
anywhere.
I think they filmed it because I ran into a quote from Mel Brooks that said, as he was going through the movie, he realized he needed far less of Lepetamine, and he made a comment to somebody. Goes, "I'm leaving everything that's mine on the floor."
That's interesting.
So,
Well, I have not seen this anywhere.
I have not seen it anywhere either. I don't. Just because they filmed it, they may not have pressed it for an
Yeah.
outtake.
Right.
It was definitely cut, but
Well, and this was in a time before they did that. You know, they had no concept that this was going to home video or DVD or
Right.
a podcast or anything like
I
that.
do have to say though that line though, and it reminds me of the very first what's the Kingsman movie?
Right.
The whole joke about mumble mumble mumble. Apple. Oh, anything you say, Bill. And turns over. No, not that.
Yeah, that's
That was pushing the edge in
that was pushing the edge.
1974.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't fit this movie. It goes a little bit
it's too far
the blue.
Right.
It goes too blue.
It's too blue for what's happening in this movie, right? I think, and then it would completely, I think, take away later from the whole shtick with Lily von Stupp.
Yeah,
Because she provides that,
definitely,
you know?
Yeah.
She provides that sort of blue humor to the point of, loosen your bullets. And is it true what they say about how you people are gifted? It's true.
Right.
It's true. That even then, we'll find out when we get to that scene, there was a line he himself self-edited from the movie that he thought was a really funny line, but also thought was probably too blue at the time.
And I think the studio came down and said, this one's going out.
Well, he had full, which if you remember, he had full carte blanche. His contract said, so that's why he had no problem taking notes from anybody who said, cut this, cut this, cut this. He didn't have to.
Yeah, because he just didn't do it.
His contract said he could release the movie he wanted.
So, did this get an R rating or a PG rating?
R.
This was R.
This was R. Yeah.
So, arguably, they could have done it.
Yeah, but that still would have been pushing the envelope.
That would have been pushing it. Yeah.
It's to us, our 21st century minds, and having seen as much as we've seen, that was funny. Like when I read it, I was like, okay, that's funny because he's quoting the letter from Harriet Van Johnson saying, you are the leading asshole of the state.
Sure.
And he's offended by being called an asshole. He yells that out loud, and Miss Stein hears it a completely different way.
Yeah, right.
Whatever you say, Bill.
It is funny, but it doesn't fit. And I think it would have almost been it would have been out of place in this movie.
Yeah.
That joke would have been out of
place. And the whole brother-in-law bit, he doesn't know his brother-in-law.
Yeah, it's dumb.
And mentioning the fact that he does have a wife. I almost like it how we initially looked at it when we were back. Does he have a wife? He's like, well, he doesn't talk about it, and he's not afraid to bring this woman dressed as she is into meetings. So we both thought, well, maybe
He isn't
he
wearing
doesn't.
a wedding band.
Right. So it does answer the question, but I also think it makes him a less likable character.
I agree.
So,
And he already is he's not a well likable. He's an easily likable character.
right.
So that would have, I don't know, that would have either pushed him to being a real moron or just a sleazebag.
Yeah.
So,
And it's less sleazy if we think he's a widower or divorced or single
not,
of
just
some
not
kind.
married, yeah.
We realize, okay, it's your typical politician
Right.
with your secretary, the stereotypical of that already.
And we've
then
already
seeing
kind
her-
of established that he is a sleazy moron.
Right.
So we've already kind of got that. So this doesn't take the movie any further down the road anyway.
No, so I wanted to just dive into that first because I thought it was interesting. The first thing I came across of a scene that was completely clipped, which will dovetail nicely into today, because there's a whole lot that was changed on the fly from what we're actually seeing in the final product.
I could almost see a variation of this scene with Headley coming in with the letter and saying, "Hey, you got this letter from the people of
Yeah, but
Rock
Headley
Ridge."
wouldn't care.
Headley wouldn't care, except that
I mean, he wouldn't have even given it to the governor, I don't think.
he probably wouldn't have.
It
would have really more
Like the line
confirmed for
says,
him.
he was spying. He goes, "It's working. My plan."
Right.
So if he were to have gotten that letter, why would he have shown it to the governor? Let the governor
Yeah.
stay ignorant of this.
Right, except that, continue to make the governor mad at the people of Rock Ridge. Or,
The governor doesn't care.
He doesn't care.
Governor doesn't give a damn.
Yeah.
As long as it didn't cost him anything and he gets, land and stuff for free, whatever. He's
Yeah. So this is absolutely a throwaway scene.
It is a throwaway scene. It would lessen, I think, the impact of Lily von Stupp. And it also, I think, makes us less sympathetic for or creates maybe even a worse image of Lepidamine. And when you don't think highly of when you don't like somebody like at all, you're not going to laugh. And I
No.
think we still needed to laugh at some of his bits coming up.
I agree. I think that's true with every character
Mhm.
because it is a comedy. And you really don't want, in a comedy, you really don't want a character who you despise.
Right. If it's so dark, then it becomes a different comedy. It becomes one of those black comedies.
Right.
Which means a dark comedy. For our friends who are too out of the mainstream to know the terminology.
Right. And you don't.
That's African American. No.
Yeah, no. And you don't want it going that blue either.
Right.
That would be a very hard turn for this. So I'm really glad that got cut.
Yeah. So let's get into this scene, and we start off with a pretty normal, getting ready for the day scene. Jim is shaving, and Sheriff Bart looks like he's rolling a cigarette. Let's go to the script because there are some definite differences as well. In this particular scene, we start off interior jailhouse, Rock Ridge, morning. Jim and Bart are seated across the desk from each other. Jim is rolling a cigarette. Bart picks up 2 pieces of cigarette paper, wets the end of one and carefully glues it to the other. Jim picks up a little sack of Bull Durham tobacco and offers it to Bart. Jim saying, "Need the makings of a cigarette?"
Sure.
Bart, "No thanks, got my own." Bart takes out his own little sack, reaches into it with 2 fingers and spreads some of his private stock across the cigarette papers. "Jim, you know what they're calling me, don't you?" Bart says, "What?" Jim says, "I'm your deputy nigger." Jim laughs, strikes a match, lights Bart's cigarette, and then lights his own. Bart takes a deep drag. And then in a highly strained voice, this is Bart now supposedly, "Well, once I establish myself in this here place, that might turn out to be an important position." Jim sniffing the air. "Oh, Arizona Gold." It's a kind of marijuana there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then he says, "Listen, do me a favor. Don't go out there. You can't win these people over no matter what you do. They are just not going to accept you." Bart, "That was yesterday. This is a brand new, beautiful day. You don't understand human nature. Once you establish yourself, they've got to accept you." Bart rises, snubs out his cigarette, and tucks the stub into his shirt pocket and exits. So before we go on to Main Street, completely rewritten this scene for what we see in the theatrical release.
Oh, by the way, I got a note this morning.
From who?
Well, I'm not sure. It was addressed to the Deputy Spade.
Well, once I establish myself in this here town, Deputy Spade might turn out to be a groovy position. Yeah.
Listen, Bart, I want you to do me a favor. I don't want you going out there this morning. You can't win these people over no matter what you do. They're just not going to accept you.
I'm glad those fingers ain't loaded.
Whew. Just like old times. Like I told you, once you establish yourself, they got to accept you. Catch you later. Good luck.
I really like the way that they rewrote it better.
Yeah. I think it
for a lot of
flows a
reasons.
whole lot better.
I think so too. And it's a better scene. And for
I don't like the fact that that Jim is now like the town somehow already knows these two guys are buds and are now starting to denigrate Jim, and they gave him that phrase. I don't know how they would have known about their relationship, and I don't know how he would have been labeled that way, and I think that would have also taken our storyline darker than it needed to go.
Yeah,
like they're labeling the white guy as like a sympathizer.
Right. And in this scene, I had to kind of think about this scene a little bit because he does say you got a letter today, and he says it's addressed
I got a
to
note today.
A note today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, who's it to? And he said, I don't know. It was addressed to the deputy.
And I love the change of the language instead of saying, and it wasn't about being delivered to him. It might have been. I mean, you can still read it that way, but it was addressed to the Deputy Spade.
And which is an interesting word because that is really not in the vernacular at all today.
No. Which made me wonder, when I hear that, is that a letter for Jim, or was Jim saying that somebody was addressing it to the sheriff?
Right.
So it leaves it more ambiguous.
It does.
And you could say, oh, okay, there is a subtext that maybe they're saying Jim is the Deputy Spade. And then, of course, the sheriff laughs and he says, who knows? Maybe that become a groovy position.
There's so much in this. So I love his language that is really 1970s
1974,
because
definitely.
that groovy position is a great word. And, of course, nobody would have ever used that in 1874.
No, actually, I looked this up. Groovy actually became slang in the late 50s, throughout the 60s, and into the early 70s. Now, we think of it as a 70s thing, but apparently it was late 50s we started hearing the term groovy. But I think it did get co-opted a lot into the black culture because you heard a lot of that in the disco. Hey, it's groovy, man.
The hippie and black culture.
So I looked up, well, what is groovy synonymous for? Because sometimes we use the word actually had multiple uses. It could mean cool, could mean excellent, fashionable. Man, that's some groovy threads you're wearing, or amazing. Whoa, did you see what he did? That was groovy.
Yep.
So,
and one of the places that you've probably most recently heard it is the bus driver on The Simpsons. Uses that term. Yeah.
What's his name?
And he's a total head.
Hey, Bart, how you doing, bud?
How did that dude ever pass the drug screen to be a bus driver?
What was the bus driver's name? What's his name?
Oh, yes.
Otto.
Yes.
See, I knew if I sat there and like ruminated about it long enough, Otto. Hey, Bart. I love Otto. Why is that always the synonymous like stoner voice? Like I've known people that might partake in the occasional medicinal marijuana.
Yeah, I know people.
Nobody talks like that.
No.
The only person that did it was Cheech.
They may get
Chong.
a little
Chong.
Yeah, Chong. Yeah, Tommy Chong definitely did that.
Hey man, what's in this little Maui Wowie, man?
You know, they may kind of slow down and mellow out when they're.
Yeah. But isn't that more like playing to the comedy of what you think
it
is versus what it really is?
Definitely.
And I think we get that in this minute too. You know, you get a reaction to smoking a joint here that it doesn't do anything to your voice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, definitely not. But I will tell you, both of these guys know what they're doing.
It was funny.
They both really know how to lay one out.
So that part was actually written in here, but we don't call out the kind of marijuana it is. We don't call it Arizona Gold. We don't need it. I think this is one of those moments where in the first 25 seconds, besides hearing the rustic theme of the banjo picking of the Blazing Saddle, or the Ballad of Rock Ridge theme, we can establish very quickly what's happening here.
Yeah. And if they were shooting this today, there'd be a clock on the wall behind them and it would be 4:20, you know.
420.
It's very obvious that they're blazing one, and
they're blazing one. Nicely done, sir.
no, thank you. And the fact that they share it, nobody shares a Marlboro,
Right.
Well,
it does so much right here in this very short minute that we have, because like I said, for about 15 or 20 seconds, we really don't have anything. Actually, it's right at because Jim starts to smell the smoke. He actually is in the middle of shaving. He's like, wait a minute, that smells familiar.
He kind of stops.
Then we see Bart doing the whole tug on his hit. It's not until 22 seconds in that we get our first line.
Oh, wow.
And he says, "That's what."
Okay.
He goes, "Oh, by the way, I got a note today." Like, oh, who's it to? He goes, "I don't know, but it's addressed to the Deputy Spade." He's like, and I love Cleveland Little. I think it may have changed. Maybe he was still going to use the N-word. And I think if you look, I don't think Gene Wilder ever uses the N-word.
I don't think he does.
Not once at all.
I don't think he
and
does.
so by changing it to a different, no, it's slang. It's still an epithet, but I don't think it's as bad as the N-word.
It is, but it's strangely, it's a word that was used right after the Civil War. That's really the time frame when that word was used a lot. And I've heard it, but I really am kind of trying to think of when I've heard it. But that's not one that's been really common.
Let's see here. If I go to the Urban Dictionary.
Yes, if you go to the Urban Dictionary, you will find
it means to have something positively right across the board. Spades is a deck of cards. To have spades means you are fortunate to have the highest level of satisfaction. I've got it in spades,
right,
is the term. Or a derogatory term for an African American, more commonly used in post-Civil War. Look at you. It's like you've got knowledge and stuff. What happened? We got rid of our guest, and suddenly you figure like wait. We had a void. You had to fill the nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly, and I don't know why, because I've never been a big pothead, but for some reason this subject really interests me. So
no, see, actually, when we get to this, and we can jump around this minute. It's just the two of us, but the whole Mickey Mouse voice that Gene Wilder uses. I consulted some friends of mine who live in Colorado. Apparently, this is not a known phenomenon to them, that you take a hit and start channeling your inner Mickey.
And all the times I've been around people smoking grass, that has never happened one time. However, this was really funny. And I still get caught off guard by that every single time I watch that scene.
Listen, Walt, I need you to break this down for me. At what point do we make fun? Is this a Warner Brothers dig at Disney?
I don't know.
Because, I mean, there's obviously there's a call out to Bugs Bunny. We're going to get actually the Merry Melodies theme at one point in an upcoming minute. It's obvious. We've had many guests compare Bart to Bugs Bunny, the trickster. You even have the kind of cartoon sound effects. Our guys from earlier this week, Tim Andrews and Jeff Lieboff, both said is very much a live action Merry Melodies cartoon. I wonder, I never thought of it before because it is funny to have the voice change, the pitch change, but at the same time, was this, because it sounds so much like Mickey Mouse.
It is, and I don't know if it's a direct call out, but it sure sounds like him.
It could be Mel Brooks saying, let's just do it, just do a funny voice, and Gene Wilder may have come up with it. It's like, and Mel Brooks may have said, "That's brilliant. We're making fun of Mickey Mouse."
Yeah, right. Could be.
Like Mickey's a stoner, like that. Right. Like, could you imagine if Mickey, Mickey normally talks like Gene Wilder, unless he's baking one, like he's roasting a bowl or something.
It would explain
an
awful lot. It would sure explain
Minnie,
Fantasia.
Could you bring Pluto in here? Let's try a funky three-way.
Well, and it gives a whole new meaning to Blazing Saddles.
So, Minnie, I got word you were with Goofy. You want to explain yourself? I'm not laughing now.
I really don't care.
Gosh, she's beautiful.
Now, that would explain Goofy a lot.
Yeah, Mickey went and beat the hell out of him.
That would explain an awful lot about Goofy.
So yeah, this scene where Bart's rolling his own joint, and which would have been typical of rolling your own cigarette, and they had this as a gag in the original script that Jim was rolling his own cigarette and was using actual tobacco, and then to have the gag of Cleavon Little rolling his own joint. He does a good job rolling his own cigarette, though.
He really does.
It looks great.
These guys know what they're doing.
Yeah. And I do like, very quickly, so if the letter is meant to be for Jim, and they think Jim is the new Deputy Spade, and it's a shout out to him, by lightening it to me, I know it's still a derogatory term, but it feels like it's a lighter term.
Yeah.
And Cleavon Little laughs at it. Mm-hmm. And so whether Cleavon Little or we, the audience, think, well, did Deputy Spade mean this letter was for the sheriff or not? It doesn't matter, because he immediately goes, who knows? In 20 years, Deputy Spade may be a groovy title.
Yeah.
Again, not in the script. Made this stuff up between the two of them.
It really made this a good scene. Where I don't like it the way it's written.
No, I don't like it at all.
But the way that they play it out is a great scene. And it also shows the friendship that's developing between the two of them.
Yeah, especially when he goes to share the cigarette. They get a laugh at a stupid note being left by someone probably anonymously.
Yes.
They can both chuckle at it. Then they share a hit of the cigarette.
And you can also see developing between them, there's almost that secret joke. They're the only two who are really laughing at that. And, we as the audience get brought into it. But they are already laughing at the idiots on the outside who are, who are the racists and the town folks who don't get it yet. So it's really kind of a cool thing to see that relationship developing. And it is so much better the way that they did it than the way it's written. So
yeah.
I really like it. And I also like that they're burning one instead of it just being a regular cigarette.
Oh, yeah. Having that little bit of that joke underneath.
Yeah.
And, as a kid, I never got it. I just assumed it's an unfiltered, they're rolling a raw cigarette. It's not got a filter. So as a kid, I just thought it was like really harsh.
Well, and if you watched Westerns, you knew that they rolled their own.
Right. So this is one of those things that works multiple levels depending on the age you are when you see it, or when you get a little older and realize, I get what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you get over about 14, go, that dude in my science class. I got it. Right. Yeah, I got it. Well, the only thing, it's kind of funny because we just said that the term spade was actually historically accurate. You know what isn't historically accurate here?
What?
They didn't have marijuana in the Old West. It's kind of weird. So in 1874, there was actually an article in the New York Times about it.
Wait, really?
Yeah, 1874 article in the New York Times. And there is a reference to hemp smoking in the Mexico mountains, the western Mexico mountains. In 1619, Virginia actually had a law requiring all farms grow hemp for ropes, and it was actually used as a form of currency in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia.
Well, there's still a move today to try to get hemp and hemp products, which is different than marijuana.
But it's from the same plant.
Well, you're going to kind of have one with the other.
Right. But it wasn't then for, medicinal purposes or for getting high or anything. No. It was for the hemp.
Wouldn't the closest thing they would have in the Old West, at least in this area, would have been peyote?
But
it would have only been discovered if you'd been with the Indians.
The Indians had it, right. And it wasn't really, people weren't really getting high. That was not a big thing.
When you were in those little powwows with the little peace pipe trying to...
If
they believed that's how you
Indians,
communed with your forefathers who had gone on before you.
And they really liked the visions that came from it and stuff like that.
It was very much part of their religion.
But the white Anglo-Saxon... that whole community, the whole Western community that we think of, that was the non-Indian community, they weren't really getting high on it. There was a big alcohol
but there were opium dens. That was really popular at this time as well, and especially in more of the gold and silver mining towns that would spring up where they'd have a lot of wealth. They'd have the Oriental culture would bring the opium dens and allow you to smoke opium, and that would get you completely blitzed.
That's right, but it wasn't really until the early 1900s when marijuana got introduced to the American culture through the relationship with
but by 1974, no problem.
1974? Absolutely, as we all know.
So this is another anachronistic moment, right?
And sorry to get us all kind of down this pothole, but
We stumbled in the pothole. Nice. Wow.
Thank you.
God.
I'm here all week, folks.
Save some for tomorrow. We've got one more.
Oh, no, I got more.
Episode.
I got more coming.
Okay, good. Because, our guest was here was supposed to be here today and tomorrow night. They may be able to show up tomorrow, but based on what I heard, we may not be able to get them. So you may have to hold off because, God, you are nailing it.
I'm rolling.
You're rolling. See, that joint is swollen. Light it.
Groovy.
Light them up, smoke them down. Go on out.
Hey, dude.
We are now powered with Mighty Joint.
I'm really kind of surprised we couldn't get anybody to join us for this episode particularly.
I know. You know what's funny? I just read this yesterday. Remember how we talked about way back that this was shot in Panavision, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was his first ever in Panavision, and he only did one other movie in Panavision, and that would be History of the World.
Really?
Yeah, he decided the whole big giant lenses, those anamorphic ratios, he was just like, it was more difficult to shoot interiors and close-ups, and he's just screw it. He goes, so the only two movies he ever did in Panavision was Blazing Saddles and History of the World.
I can understand why History of the World was shot that way. That would make sense.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's great for doing any of these big giant outdoor vistas and things, question. And I love how Blazing Saddles is shot. But I also understand if you're doing like a kind of a screwball comedy with closed sets, you don't need the Panavision cameras.
No, you really don't. So when you look at this movie, I mean, obviously there are some scenes that stand out, but without breaking it down 1 minute at a time, if someone had said, hey, that scene when they're smoking weed in Blazing Saddles, would you have remembered that? Like, would this scene have jumped?
Depending when you asked me that question, if I was a lot younger, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Smoking what? Right. I remember the scene when they were smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, but let's say 5 years ago. If somebody had mentioned the scene, would it have stood out to you?
It would have to me, but I have to also remember in context, I could rewrite the movie.
Right. But this was not a scene that stood out to me.
Oh, it wasn't for you? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if I thought about it for a minute, I might go, oh, yeah, they did.
And you know why it does for me is because I know this, which I love, we're talking about bringing back a theme from last season, a joke that's setting itself up because they're having this very normal conversational scene that's going to tie into right back here after he goes out and tries to walk the streets.
Right. I would have remembered this scene. Right. I would not have remembered that they were smoking weed.
Oh, no, I definitely, yeah. And I think probably because I've always liked Mickey Mouse and I've always done the Mickey Mouse voice.
Right.
And here's a little hint.
That part stood out more to me than the...
Little nugget about me. Mickey Mouse was officially, quote, born, like his creation date was November the 18th. I think it was 1929. And I share his birthday. I was born November the 18th. So I always think, I got Mickey's birthday.
That's funny. I share a birthday with the Girl Scouts. That's that's who I share a birthday with. So how many movies?
How many brownies have you had?
We're not going to comment on.
I meant the pot brownies.
We're not going to comment on that either. I hold a state license. I am not commenting on things like that.
Oh, that's right. Disclaimer, folks. Everything we do here is only made up for the entertainment of our audience.
We are playing characters called Alan and Walt.
Right.
These are not the real people.
Things you may hear should not be construed as factual in this podcast.
Then a lot. A lot. I love brownies. So, what were we talking about?
Okay, you asked me about if someone had said, do you remember the scene about the smoking weed?
Right. So, other than stuff like Cheech and Chong and things like that, how many movies do you think actually had a scene during this time frame of people smoking pot?
I couldn't tell you.
Or doing drugs at all. I can't really think of any that stand out.
I couldn't tell you. I know it's in a lot of movies where they're rolling a joint or the joke about smelling something in the air. It's like, ooh, I know something's there. Obviously, Mel Brooks is going to follow this up with History of the World Part 1, and we've got Mighty Joint, which I already parodied a few seconds ago. But
it was still kind of anathema. I mean, it really, through the 80s even, and into the 90s, was anathema.
Well, no, I think all the movies in the 80s, everybody was snorting coke.
Yeah, that's true.
There was a lot of drug use, but it was all... I mean, I think 16 Candles they were smoking. Oh, Breakfast Club, they were smoking dude.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And they had the whole scene where they had to go steal it out of his locker.
That's right. And it was in a sock.
What if your drugs were on fire? Well, that's impossible, sir. My drugs are in His name's
What's
Pants.
his name's underwear?
And the kid, Anthony Michael Hall's looks like he just gotten shot. He's like, oh.
Yeah, thanks for pulling me in, dude. You narc.
That's impossible. My jugs are in his pants.
Nobody's done that movie 1 minute at a time either.
No.
We keep stumbling across these movies that nobody's touched
Because,
yet.
I mean, there's a lot of movies.
Well, but there are a lot of movies by minute, too. But that's a real popular one from...
I keep
people
saying
our age.
we'll probably need to do that as a Patreon special. I would
Yeah,
love
we
to
do. That's a
just
great
look
movie.
at Breakfast Club.
Great movie.
So yeah, there's other. I mean, I didn't prep for that in my thinking for this minute. If you had said, "Hey, think about all the movies that people have smoked pot," there's probably dozens that would, if I had just thought about it and looked it up and said, what are the, because there's websites dedicated to let parents know what are in movies,
Right.
and you could look and say, well, here it might be questionable because they do this or that or whatever. And they've
Right.
got a lot of those will say, well, there's a use of the pot usage or drug usage or whatever at this minute or that minute, and they let parents know that kind of stuff. So
it's just an interesting cultural thing for me because it was still looked at through a bit of a jaundiced eye as we were growing up and going through high school and college. But it was always one of those things that it was like, is it really that big a deal?
right.
Like I've just never, to me, it's never been that big of a moral issue and something I've really done. But to me, it wasn't a big moral issue.
No.
I've always kind of questioned why it was illegal, I guess.
And I think to this day, you're seeing more and more states are heading toward, you know what, we can tax it. We can make money out of it.
Right.
We can actually draw a piece of the underground drug trafficking out of business by taking it over.
Right.
So I've had conversations with various men in various individuals in law enforcement who have said for our state here in Georgia, which is a little bit more conservative in the Bible Belt, they said it's coming. For now, it's still against the law, but it's coming.
It is coming.
The writing's on the wall.
It is coming. It's interesting to see, that even in our lifetime, that you've really gone from places through the South and probably around the country that had dry counties where you literally could not buy alcohol. You definitely couldn't buy brown alcohol, but well,
because that was worse.
Liquor, yeah,
It's
right.
the devil's poo.
It's right. It's the fire water that we've referenced, and now you have states all over the country that are legalizing marijuana. So it's
that was the funniest thing moving down here from Detroit in 1985 is my mom used to always go grocery shopping on Sunday. That was just the day. Went to church early, came home, and then decided, okay, what am I going to make? Because my mom grew up in that time where what are the 2 or 3 big meals I'm going to make so we can have leftovers to last until next Sunday? Because she only wanted to make like 2 or 3 meals and we would have leftovers. So she'd decide, all right, I want to get a roast. I'm going to get a bunch of ground beef so I can make something, or I'm going to make whatever. And then she'd go to the store, and of course, if she needed wine, if she needed beer, whatever. The very first time, I'll never forget shopping with her, and she puts beer down on the conveyor belt on Sunday, 1985 Georgia, Sunday.
Wow.
And the woman looked at her and goes, "You can't buy this." And she goes, "I've been old enough to buy this." Like, my mom thinking it's about an age thing. I'm like, no, you're not allowed to buy alcohol on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's for our listeners out there, and maybe some of our listeners across the pond, they're going, what?
Yeah.
But for the longest time in the state of Georgia, you could not buy on Sunday. And you still can't buy 24 hours.
Well, and it was really not till the 90s, maybe late 90s, that they changed that law.
No,
Maybe
it was in the
more
early
recently.
2000s.
That's crazy.
I was here interviewing a politician, and I had to call him on this because he goes, I have letters. He goes, this was maybe 10, 15 years ago. It wasn't that long ago for Sunday sales.
Right.
For Sunday sales.
Yeah, you're right.
I had a politician sit there right where you are, looking at me saying, I've got letters here from package stores saying, please don't pass this. I don't want to be open 7 days a week. And I went to him, I'm like, wait a minute. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to call you on this. Nobody is mandating a store has to open on Sunday, but if a business wants to open on Sunday, this gives them the option. And he looked at me and goes, what? I'm like, are you trying to tell me the bill is going to mandate? It's going to force them to open? He goes, no. I'm like, so then what's the problem? This business owner that you said you're referencing is please don't do this, doesn't have to work on Sunday.
I remember hearing this interview. I have no idea how I heard that interview, but I remember that
You may have
interview.
heard me tell the story because it's...
Maybe, but
I had people come at me and
remember
go,
because I remember liquor stores saying, well, we don't want to have to be open on Sundays. And you were like, well, you don't have to be open on Sundays.
No.
You're a business. You
I've
make the
recounted
decisions.
this story before because it
Yeah, I may
drove
have
me
heard
nuts
you
about
talking
how
about
a
that.
politician tried to frame it in a way that if you didn't question, you're like, oh yeah, why would we make people work 7 days? I work 7 days a week. You know,
Come on.
that's up to the individual business, right?
It's to the individual business, to the individual conscience. If you don't want to work Sundays, don't work Sundays.
So,
You know?
but yeah, that passed, and then they've just recently put the brunch bill in for Georgia. So now you can
right.
actually get, if you let's say go to let's say you go to an early 9:45 service, go to brunch after at 11 o'clock, and you want a mimosa, you couldn't get that at a restaurant until just last year.
Right. Well, and I still agree with the old Eddie Murphy thing about no drinking on an election day until noon. He had a bit about, I don't remember who the politician was. He was like, yeah, because then somebody's, going to go get drunk and go, well, I'm voting for so-and-so. And then they're like, wait, he won? So, but anyway, I don't know how we got down that pothole, but
And that's where we were. We started with pot and got back to alcohol.
So, but anyway, but I don't know why it stands out so much this time, other than the fact that we're breaking down minute by minute, because that really isn't the big thing in this minute.
No,
but it is just kind of a interesting side note of that they are getting burned here. So
I do think it's interesting that we get the joke of the Mickey Mouse voice of, listen, Bart, I don't want you going out there today. It's too dangerous. I do like that he delivers it totally straight. Mm-hmm. Never cracks at his own joke. We don't see Cleavon Little crack because he probably was laughing on the other side of this take. But it also shows, once again, Gene Wilder, when he delivers a serious line, even in a funny way, there's a genuineness to it. And he really does. He really is saying, look, I know you feel comfortable because you made it basically through the day and through the night, but these people tried to kill you. You know, I'm worried about you going too fast.
yes.
And I think that's where we leave this minute, is him kind of giving that warning. And it comes across as a friend who cares, literally, not just I'm saying this for your benefit or I'm obligated. He really doesn't want to see Sheriff Bart get hurt.
No, he doesn't. And they really have a very quick bond here. And you see it between the two characters, but I wondered, too, between the two actors, because they have such great chemistry. There is a real warmth between the two of them.
I did read a note that Gene Wilder and Cleavon Little got along so well because Gene had already been moving into movies and had already done films and had been already recognized for his work in film. But, we talked about how they both came from stage. Cleavon Little did not have nearly the kind of film experience at this point.
No.
And Gene would often say, okay, well, let me give you some tips on the difference of how you kind of convey yourself in front of the camera versus on stage. Here's how you can compress yourself. Here's how you can convey more with your face, not so much with your body. And so there was a note I had read that they got along very, very well between takes because they would often, Cleavon Little was looking for sort of advice, and Gene Wilder wanted to see him do the very best he could. It wasn't, let me show you what you're doing wrong. It was, let me give you some tips because I want you to do well.
It's just another reason to like Gene.
Just a genuine nice
He's
guy.
such a great guy. And we keep talking about this. We're like, we're waiting to find that one person who's like, that jackass.
Yeah,
and
no.
they're not out there.
They're not out there.
So.
I almost wish we had come up with the idea of this podcast before he died.
I know.
I would have loved to have had one chance to interview Gene Wilder.
There are some great interviews out there with him, though.
Yeah, there are. And thankfully, with the internet, I have watched most of them.
Yeah, and I've watched a ton of them too. And he was interviewed on a podcast too. I keep meaning to post this, but I was listening to it the other day, and it's really a great interview, but it's also kind of sad because you realize how great a person he was, and you just hate that he's gone. But
well, as long as the podcaster, whoever it was treating it well, because sometimes I've heard
they did. No,
I've heard celebrities on podcasts, especially when they're older and they've kind of I hate to say this term, but they've kind of become past their prime.
Yeah,
and so they're on a podcast. And sometimes I've heard people like, you don't even know anything really about this person. It's like somehow they got on your show, but you don't really know what you're asking.
No, this was a gushing fan.
Good.
This was a gushing fan interview. It was the kind of interview that I think you and I would do with him. So I really liked it. I'll have to post.
I don't think we gush. Well, you did with Beverly.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
You were. Let me tell you why everything's great.
Yeah.
This is my favorite.
Well,
you're my favorite.
She's one of those actresses that I
show
just
me your boobies.
Really like. Yeah. I can get beyond that. Usually.
Well,
I can be a fan without being inappropriate.
I do think later when we release our interview with Bert and Gilliam, that's just a great conversation.
Well, he's a fun, nice guy, and that is in some ways the same way that interview that I'll post with Gene was.
Okay, good.
It was a very friendly interview, and it was the interviewer really knew a lot about him.
Okay,
and so
you got to take yourself a note now, to make sure that you put it on the Facebook page for our listeners.
Yeah, so. I absolutely will.
All right, well, you know what? We got plenty we can continue to conversate about in the next minute. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and close out this particular minute number 44. Do you have anything else in your notes for this minute?
There's actually one other thing. Have you ever shaved with a straight blade?
I have never tried to.
That is a skill in itself.
But I heard there is no closer shave than
no closer shave.
Straight razor shaver.
One of the barbershops near my house, they use a straight blade either for your face or for your neck, and that is a great shave. He is not doing it right. He would have sliced his face to pieces doing it the way he's doing it.
No, but you remember, they probably did multiple takes to have to reapply the shaving cream, take it off. Obviously, we're not going to let him do it with a real straight razor.
And if you actually go online and look at some of the videos on how to do it, if you do it right, it's a good shave.
Isn't it slow?
It is slow.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do like he's doing, like real fast little, he's only covering that small area. You're supposed to kind of do one continuous sweeping motion.
And I don't really have the patience to do it well. I really don't. It does. It takes a while. I'm just, the few times I actually shave.
But I bet most people wouldn't even know, especially even today. Most people, you're shaving with a Bic razor if you're shaving, or, the beard thing is so in right now.
Right.
Most people don't even shave like with a razor.
Yeah, and I usually wear
not a straight razor.
Yeah, no, nobody shaves. Yeah. And if you do it, it's because you're kind of. I've noticed it's kind of a new hipster kind of deal.
Oh, is there a retro thing where people are going and buying, or they're just going to get straight razor shaves?
I've seen it both. I've seen at some of the hipster shops. Yeah. We should ask Tim about it because I know Tim's a licensed barber.
That's true,
and he would have given some insight there. But yeah. He would have been cutting his face all to pieces if he was really using a straight blade the way he was doing it.
All right. Well, I don't have anything left. I've already gone through all of the changes in the script, and you saw significant. And we've got even more changes coming tomorrow, because if everything that they were going to shoot was based on the script in the next minute, and it doesn't work anymore, and I'll tell you why when we get there tomorrow. So before I set the stage for what's coming for Friday, tomorrow, to wrap up this week, Walt, where can we send people to learn a little bit more about our show?
Well, probably the best place in the world to find us is at thewilderride.com. From there, you can link to everything about us. You can read our bios if you're interested. You can also find past episodes and places on the internet that you can listen to our show, from iTunes to whatever. And speaking of iTunes, it would be much appreciated if you'd go out and give us a rating. If you like what you're hearing, we would really love to get a 5-star rating from you. And if you wouldn't mind making a comment, in their crazy, funky algorithm, you need a comment in order for it to kind of push us up the charts a little bit. So then anybody looking for Gene or our show in particular can find us much more easily.
It's one of those things where, and now they're moving toward this term, we still call it iTunes, but they want to call it Apple Podcasts.
Right.
But it's really this idea, it's so easy to just click stars. But if you somehow add the extra effort of commenting, that value of your stars is somehow gives it more weight. So therefore your podcast becomes a little bit more easy to find for people searching for those terms or whatever.
Absolutely.
I don't know how it works. I don't care how it works. But if you give us a comment, chances are we'll spotlight you on our Facebook page.
Yeah, we will definitely do that. And one thing I also would like to ask, a favor, really, tell your friends and family about us. There are a gazillion podcasts out there. I read something this week. They don't even know how many podcasts are currently out there because there's so many of them.
I think the last just generic number I heard, it was somewhere upwards of 10 million podcasts exist today.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And it's really great. I mean, I'm a big podcast listener as well as
that doesn't mean there's 10 million great podcasts out there.
No, there are not.
Because anybody can do it.
Listen to several, particularly in my field of work, that are not that great.
Yeah.
But if you do like us, share with your friends. Post on Facebook or on Twitter and just let your friends know. And for those of you who have done that, we really, really, really appreciate you doing that.
And come back tomorrow because we're going to continue with this. You can't win these people over. And we're going to end with make yourself at home. And I hate it. It's going to be one of those minutes that breaks right in the middle of a very good monologue. But that's okay. We'll be able to actually spread that into Monday. But we got to take care of Friday first. So come back tomorrow for another edition of this, The Wilder Ride.
Is it 4:20 yet?
Listen, Walt, as far as I'm concerned, it's 4:20 anytime.
Great. Now you got us down another pothole.
Hold on. You want some? Oh, wait, no, you can't. I'll take your share.
Well, the character I'm playing can.
Oh, here you go. Now, see,
Thanks,
normally
dude.
I would have this kind of voice. From what I understand. Thanks, dude.
Thanks, dude. There's someone right outside the studio.
You heard the story about Mickey and Minnie were at marriage counseling? You never heard this story about Mickey and Minnie at marriage counseling?
I don't think so.
So Mickey and Minnie were having some marital problems, and they're sitting in the marriage counselor's office, and the marriage counselor looks through his notes, says, last time we were talking, I just want to remind us of the conversation. And Mickey, Minnie was really upset with you because you were making fun of her intelligence. And he said, I don't know what you mean. And he said, well, you said she was basically really stupid. And he goes, no, the reason we're here is because I told her she was fucking goofy. No, the reason I said we're here is because I said you're fucking goofy. I swear to God. I walk in on them. Did you ever see Goofy's ass in the air?
It was literal.
I didn't. Wasn't talking about her intelligence.